Imagine this: one afternoon, the factory doors shut. Not because of strikes, not because of lack of demand, but because someone halfway across the world decided your car's heartbeat no longer matters. That's the new reality. That's the new battlefield. Because today, a chip war, not a trade war, a chip war, is not just messing with microprocessors. It's threatening livelihoods, entire industries, and the promise of mobility itself. And yes, your next car might. Stuck in this mess. If you want to stay ahead of this unfolding chip war, hit that subscribe or follow button, because this story is far from over, and the next move could decide the future of mobility. The seizure of Nexperia, a Dutch-based semiconductor company owned by China's Wingtech Technology, marks one of the most significant disruptions in the European industrial landscape in recent years. Nexperia specializes in producing semiconductors that are essential components in modern electronics, including microchips used extensively in the automotive industry. These chips are not mere accessories. They are the lifeblood of modern vehicles, controlling everything from engine management and safety systems to advanced driver assistance features. The Dutch government's decision to seize Nexperia on September 30th, 2025, was officially framed around national security concerns. The government argued that foreign ownership of such a strategically critical company posed potential risks to technological sovereignty and supply chain security. However, the repercussions of this move immediately rippled through the global automotive sector. Europe's car manufacturers, many of whom rely heavily on Nexperia for chip supplies, found themselves staring down an unprecedented supply chain crisis. This wasn't just a matter of delayed shipments. Entire production lines faced the possibility of grinding to a halt because the components essential to their operation were suddenly restricted. Automakers, from Volkswagen to smaller Tier 1 suppliers, were forced to reevaluate their inventory and production schedules. The seizure illustrated the precarious balance in global trade and industrial dependencies. A relatively small semiconductor company, when caught in geopolitical tensions, can hold disproportionate influence over massive industrial sectors. It highlighted the vulnerability of European automakers whose supply chains, while optimized for efficiency, had limited redundancy when it came to essential components like chips. Beyond immediate production concerns, the Nexperia seizure also sent a stark warning about how quickly geopolitical decisions can cascade into economic disruption. It underscored the broader lesson that modern manufacturing, particularly in sectors as technologically reliant as automobiles, is deeply intertwined with global political and economic currents. In effect, what seemed like a local regulatory or security action instantly became a global industrial flashpoint, demonstrating the critical strategic importance of semiconductors in the 21st century. In response to the Dutch government's seizure of Nexperia, China's government took decisive action by banning the export of Nexperia's finished semiconductor products to the European Union. This move was not merely symbolic, it carried immediate and tangible consequences for the European automotive sector, which depends heavily on these specialized chips. The chips produced by Nexperia are critical to the functioning of modern vehicles, serving as the control units for advanced safety systems, sensors, braking mechanisms, and increasingly, electric vehicle battery management systems. By restricting their export, China effectively wielded economic leverage over Europe, highlighting how semiconductor production has become a tool of geopolitical influence. The ban caused rapid alarm among automakers, as production schedules are meticulously planned around just-in-time delivery systems that leave little room for disruption. For companies like Volkswagen, BMW, and Daimler, delays in receiving these chips threatened to halt assembly lines, disrupt inventory planning, and jeopardize timely delivery of vehicles to dealerships and consumers. The ban also exposed the fragile interdependence between global supply chains and national policies. European manufacturers realized that despite technological sophistication and operational scale, they remain vulnerable to decisions taken thousands of kilometers away in another country's political arena. The broader implications extended beyond immediate production concerns. Financial markets reacted, with stock prices of major automakers dipping as analysts revised earnings forecasts in light of potential factory shutdowns and lost revenue. Additionally, suppliers of car parts, from electronics firms to smaller component makers, faced uncertainty, highlighting how a single restriction can cascade through an entire industrial ecosystem. Strategically, the export ban served as a powerful reminder that the semiconductor industry is no longer merely a commercial domain, but a strategic asset in global diplomacy and industrial competition. Governments and corporations alike began rethinking supply chain resilience, exploring alternative sources, stockpiling critical components, and reconsidering dependency on single-country suppliers. China's move underscored that control over semiconductors translates directly into influence over global industry, creating a new layer of risk for Europe's automotive sector that went far beyond traditional trade negotiations. The export freeze imposed by China on Nexperia's semiconductor products immediately sent shockwaves through the European automotive sector, illustrating just how interconnected and fragile global supply chains have become. Major automakers, including industry giants like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, rely heavily on these chips for a wide range of vehicle systems, from basic engine controls to complex electronic safety features and increasingly sophisticated driver assistance technologies. When chip deliveries were suddenly restricted, it created a cascading effect across production schedules, inventory management, and supply chain planning. Automakers who had long optimized their operations for efficiency, adopting just-in-time manufacturing practices to reduce costs and minimize storage, found themselves facing a sudden, unforeseen bottleneck. Production lines, once smoothly coordinated, risked stalling because the critical components they depended on were no longer arriving on time. Industry bodies quickly issued warnings, emphasizing that delays were not hypothetical but imminent, and that without swift resolution, factories could be forced to suspend operations within days. This situation revealed the scale of vulnerability inherent in highly globalized supply chains, where a single disruption thousands of kilometers away can ripple through multiple layers of production, affecting not only final assembly, but also suppliers, logistics providers, and downstream distributors. Financial and operational uncertainties mounted as automakers and suppliers scrambled to assess the immediate impact, reallocate existing inventories, and negotiate with alternative suppliers, many of whom were either unable or unprepared to meet sudden demand spikes. Analysts warned that extended shortages could lead to production slowdowns, temporary layoffs, and significant revenue losses, underlining the fact that a geopolitical action could directly influence economic performance. Beyond immediate operational concerns, the crisis highlighted a broader strategic challenge: the European automotive industry's dependence on critical semiconductor imports leaves it exposed to external political pressures and economic retaliation. This situation demonstrated that securing the supply of high-tech components is not just a commercial necessity, but a matter of national industrial security, and that disruptions in this sector have consequences that reverberate far beyond factory floors, affecting jobs, investor confidence, and broader economic stability. The semiconductor crisis triggered by the Nexperia seizure has placed major European automakers, including Volkswagen, in a precarious position, forcing them to pause or adjust production for certain models. While some temporary production halts, like those affecting popular vehicles such as the Golf or Tiguan, were officially attributed to inventory management or routine scheduling, industry insiders recognize that these pauses were a direct consequence of chip shortages. Modern automobiles are highly dependent on a steady flow of semiconductors, which control essential functions, including engine management, safety systems, infotainment, and increasingly, electric vehicle battery performance. Without these chips, production lines cannot operate efficiently, and even minor delays cascade into significant disruptions across assembly plants. The situation highlights the fragility of the just-in-time manufacturing model, which has long been praised for its cost efficiency, but now reveals its vulnerability to geopolitical shocks. Automakers are faced with the challenge of balancing operational continuity with limited component availability, often having to prioritize certain models over others or temporarily slow down production rates. The broader European auto industry is especially exposed because of its reliance on specialized chips from a small number of suppliers like Nexperia, meaning alternative sources are not easily available. Additionally, suppliers of other key components from electronics to mechanical parts are affected as the production chain slows, creating ripple effects that can extend beyond the factory floor. This level of disruption not only affects immediate manufacturing timelines, but also has financial implications, with potential revenue losses, delayed deliveries, and strained customer relationships. It underscores a new reality for global manufacturing. Geopolitical decisions in one region can instantly influence production strategies, operational efficiency, and market confidence across continents. The pause in production serves as a tangible warning to the automotive sector, demonstrating that even established, globally recognized brands are vulnerable when critical technology and supply are concentrated in specific regions. It also raises pressing questions about the need for diversified sourcing, strategic stockpiles, and contingency planning to mitigate similar crises in the future. The semiconductor disruption caused by Nexperia's export freeze has not only impacted automakers themselves, but has also placed immense pressure on suppliers throughout the automotive ecosystem, including major component manufacturers like Bosch. These suppliers produce essential parts that rely on semiconductors, such as electronic control units, sensors, braking systems, and other integrated technologies critical to modern vehicles. When chip availability is interrupted, suppliers face the immediate challenge of either halting production or maintaining costly inventories to bridge gaps, which directly affects their operational efficiency and profitability. The ripple effect of this disruption extends to smaller suppliers and sub-tier manufacturers, many of whom operate on thin margins and lack the financial flexibility to absorb extended production stoppages. These companies may be forced to furlough employees, temporarily shut down plants, or delay deliveries to automakers, which in turn compounds the crisis at the assembly level. The interdependency of suppliers and manufacturers means that even a single bottleneck in semiconductor availability can cascade through multiple layers of production, affecting everything from raw material sourcing to final vehicle assembly. Financial markets and investors closely monitor these developments, as disruptions in supplier operations can signal broader economic consequences, potentially leading to revised earnings forecasts and reduced investor confidence. The situation also exposes structural vulnerabilities in global manufacturing networks, where efficiency-driven models like just-in-time production have minimized redundancy but increased susceptibility to sudden shocks. For companies like Bosch, strategic decision-making becomes urgent, involving considerations such as sourcing alternative chips, stockpiling critical components, or temporarily adjusting production schedules to prioritize high-demand products. Furthermore, this crisis highlights the broader implications of geopolitical tensions on global industry, demonstrating that decisions taken by governments in one region can have cascading operational, financial, and employment consequences across multiple countries. The experience serves as a stark reminder that supplier resilience and diversified sourcing strategies are no longer optional but essential, as dependency on a single source or region for critical technology can rapidly escalate into an industry-wide disruption, affecting millions of jobs, billions in revenue, and the stability of entire supply chains. The crisis surrounding Nexperia has revealed just how exposed the European automotive industry is to geopolitical flashpoints, emphasizing the vulnerability of global supply chains when critical components are concentrated in specific regions. While semiconductors might appear to be a niche technical issue, they are, in reality, the backbone of modern vehicles, enabling everything from engine management and braking systems to infotainment and advanced safety technologies. The sudden restriction of chip exports from China following the seizure of Nexperia by the Dutch government acted as a stark demonstration of how quickly political decisions can transform into industrial crises. Europe's automakers, long regarded as technological leaders with efficient production systems, found themselves at the mercy of international developments over which they have little control. The reliance on a small number of suppliers for such high-tech components magnifies the risk. Even a minor disruption at the production or distribution level can trigger cascading delays throughout assembly plants, affecting not only finished vehicles, but also parts suppliers, logistics operations, and downstream dealerships. Analysts have pointed out that this situation is a microcosm of a broader structural challenge in modern manufacturing, where optimization for cost and efficiency has often come at the expense of resilience and redundancy. The Nexperia case underscores that geopolitical considerations are now inseparable from industrial planning. Are for sectors as technology dependent as the automotive industry. European companies must confront the reality that supply chains are not merely operational networks, but strategic assets susceptible to foreign policy decisions, regulatory interventions, and international conflicts. This dependence also has economic and social implications. Halted production lines threaten jobs, revenue streams, and investor confidence, while delayed vehicle deliveries affect consumers and market competitiveness. In essence, the Nexperia crisis serves as a warning that Europe's industrial infrastructure is more fragile than previously acknowledged, and that reliance on limited suppliers for critical technologies creates systemic risk. Companies, governments, and policymakers are being forced to rethink strategies around supply diversification, stockpiling, and collaborative agreements to ensure that Europe can maintain industrial sovereignty and operational continuity in the face of future geopolitical tensions, while simultaneously safeguarding economic stability and competitiveness on the global stage. The semiconductor supply stoppage triggered by the Nexperia crisis threatens more than just vehicle output. It places the European automotive industry at significant risk in multiple dimensions, including employment, profitability, and broader economic stability. As production lines slow or halt due to the unavailability of critical chips, thousands of factory workers face the real possibility of temporary layoffs or reduced working hours, which in turn affects household incomes and local economies that rely on these manufacturing hubs. Suppliers, both large and small, also confront operational uncertainty as their ability to deliver essential components depends directly on the availability of semiconductors. Any disruption along the supply chain has a domino effect, jeopardizing not only production, but also financial performance, as automakers may miss delivery deadlines, incur additional costs from idle labor or machinery, and experience reduced sales. Investors and financial markets respond to such instability, often with lowered confidence in affected companies, potential stock price declines, and cautious forecasts for industry growth. Moreover, the crisis illuminates the strategic vulnerability of the European automotive sector, which has become dependent on a limited number of suppliers for advanced technological components. Unlike more diversified supply systems, the concentration of critical resources in a single company or country creates systemic risk, where a localized political or regulatory decision can cascade into continent-wide industrial disruption. The potential for a prolonged semiconductor shortage raises concerns not only for immediate operational setbacks, but also for long-term competitiveness, as delays in production can affect market share, brand reputation, and the ability to meet growing demand for electric and technologically sophisticated vehicles. Policymakers and industry leaders must grapple with these challenges, recognizing that industrial resilience requires strategic planning, diversification of supply sources, and closer alignment between government policy and economic imperatives. The Nexperia situation serves as a stark reminder that in an interconnected global economy, industrial output, employment security, and economic stability are intimately linked to access to critical technological resources, and that failure to safeguard these supply chains can have far-reaching consequences for entire industries and national economies. As of November 2025, tentative signs of easing in the Nexperia Semiconductor crisis have emerged, offering a glimmer of hope to the European automotive industry that has been grappling with potential production halts. China has begun granting certain export exemptions for civilian use chips, which means that some of the critical components required for car manufacturing are slowly making their way back to Europe. This development indicates that diplomatic and commercial negotiations are having an effect, highlighting the role of government intervention and international dialogue in resolving industrial disruptions caused by geopolitical tensions. For automakers, even a partial resumption of chip supply is crucial, as it allows them to restart halted production lines, fulfill pending orders, and stabilize operations, albeit cautiously. Suppliers, from major component manufacturers to smaller Tier 2 and Tier 3 firms, also benefit from this incremental relief, as it reduces the immediate risk of layoffs, idle machinery, and disrupted delivery schedules. However, while resumption of exports signals progress, uncertainty remains a defining characteristic of the situation. Companies cannot yet assume that the flow of chips will remain consistent or sufficient to meet the high demand, and the experience has exposed the fragility of current supply chains, emphasizing the need for long-term strategies to prevent similar crises. Analysts stress that while the partial easing provides operational breathing room, the broader lesson is the strategic importance of securing semiconductor supply through diversification, stockpiling, and building alternative partnerships beyond a single region or supplier. Moreover, this situation underscores the broader geopolitical implications of technology-dependent industries, where access to essential components can be influenced by international relations, regulatory actions, and political considerations. For Europe, the Nexperia episode serves as a wake-up call, demonstrating that resilience in high-tech manufacturing is not simply a matter of production capacity, but also of strategic foresight, diplomatic engagement, and risk management. Companies and policymakers alike are now tasked with ensuring that future shocks, whether political, regulatory, or logistical, do not threaten industrial continuity, employment, or economic stability, and that critical technological dependencies are addressed proactively rather than reactively. Ladies and gentlemen, the Nexperia crisis is more than a story about semiconductors or car production. It is a vivid reminder of how deeply intertwined global industry, technology, and geopolitics have become. A single company, a single government decision, a single export restriction can ripple through entire economies, affecting jobs, factories, and markets across continents. Europe's automotive sector has faced a wake-up call. Resilience cannot be assumed, supply chains cannot be taken for granted, and technological dependencies carry strategic weight that extends far beyond balance sheets. Yet within this challenge lies an opportunity. Companies and governments now have the chance to rethink strategies, diversify sources, strengthen contingency planning, and build systems that can withstand shocks rather than crumble under them. The crisis also teaches a broader lesson for all industries operating in a globalized world. Foresight, adaptability, and strategic preparation are no longer optional. They are essential. As production lines resume and negotiations progress, the story is far from over. But one truth remains clear. The future belongs to those who anticipate change, embrace resilience, and act decisively when the world shifts beneath their feet. The Nexperia episode is not just a cautionary tale. It is a call to action for industries, policymakers, and innovators everywhere to secure the technologies, the supply chains, and the strategies that will define the next era of global industry.